A pretty brutal loss to the New York Islanders over the weekend could be the least of the Boston Bruins' worries this week. The trade deadline is just a few days away, and they have a couple big games this week against a potential first-round playoff opponent. Let's get into it on a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Monday, March 4th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day. Bessie says hello. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet that wins. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. You can find the podcast on your favorite podcast app, Apple, Spotify, Pocket Casts, as well as on YouTube, where you can also get some bonus breaking news content, shorts over there as well. Could be a busy week, as we are just a few days away from the trade deadline. It's set for Friday at 3 p.m. Might want to take the day off because it's could be a pretty busy one for the Boston Bruins either way, either as buyers, sellers, or swappers. We talked about what's more likely on last Wednesday's episode. Before we get into today's topics, quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Following a 5-1 loss to the New York Islanders on Saturday, Boston Bruins head coach Jim Montgomery said, "We just weren't good enough, weren't firm enough. We didn't start the game on time. One of those games where, for whatever reason, we weren't very good. And now we got to move on to Toronto on Monday, and they could be doing so without Pavel Zacha, who left at 17:19 of the first period with a lower body injury and did not return." The only bright spot for the Bruins in this game was Mark McLaughlin, who nobody really expected to be there. He was called up on an emergency basis over the weekend because of, just bringing an extra forward along. Justin Brazeau wasn't able to go, so McLaughlin went in, scored the only goal for the Bruins in this one. It was his first NHL game since January 29th of 2023. Again, the lone bright spot, second period, one-timer from below the left circle off a pass from Charlie McAvoy. That's all the Bruins could muster. They were outshot 26-23, so pretty close in terms of shot differential, but after the first, it was pretty much already over as Kyle Palmieri recorded a natural hat trick to give his team a 3-0 lead. The Islanders eventually went up 5-0 in the second period, and McLaughlin's goal was not enough to bring them back in it. It was not a great outing for the goaltenders, or for Linus Ullmark specifically. 21 saves on 26 shots for an .808 save percentage. And there are, increased rumblings about his availability on the trade market. I was listening to the 32 Thoughts podcast this morning. Elliot Friedman reiterating that there is increasing noise around Linus Ullmark. Perhaps that played a part in this. Perhaps he was a bit distracted by that speculation, by wondering if he's going to be approached to waive his no trade list or no trade clause for a team that's on his list. I believe 16 teams are on his list for this season. So the Bruins are limited to where they can send him. And if they want to deal him to one of the players on his list, he needs to give his consent. If it's a team that they have a deal with that's not on the list, then they are free to do so. Is that something that's going to happen? Well, possibly. The extent of Pavel Zacha's injury will factor in here. Do they want to add to a group that is further depleted by the loss of one of your top two centers? The only way they're going to add at this point is if everybody's healthy. That's the only way that it would make sense, really, in this kind of transition year. And we're going to get a possible preview of first round opponent here coming up this week with two games against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk about that later on. But as far as this game against the New York Islanders, just a complete disappointment, a complete write-off. And, the Bruins, they're in a fight for first in the Atlantic. They're now 2 points back of Florida with one more game played. They're only 6 points up on Toronto with two more games played. Toronto has 2 games in hand. So if they take care of business against Boston this week with those 2 games still in hand, then we could be looking at a situation where the Bruins aren't just out of top spot in the Atlantic, but they've also lost home ice advantage in the opening round, falling to third place. Now, they're not really in danger yet of falling out of the playoff picture altogether. They're still 12 points up on both Tampa Bay and Detroit. Tampa has 63 games played already, so they're behind the 8 ball in terms of games remaining. But the Bruins can't really afford to go down the stretch here just on even more of a slide than they have been in recent weeks. This Islanders game was very discouraging, and hopefully they're able to rebound tonight against Toronto. Few games on tap before the trade deadline, and we'll see if that proves to be a distraction for this team. Coming up after the break, we're going to discuss who on the roster and in the AHL should be considered untouchable heading into the Friday trade deadline. FanDuel is the official sportsbook of the NBA and America's #1 sportsbook. You can get buckets right now with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's incredible value. $150 with any winning $5 bet. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. You can even get in on the action with respect to the NHL. Tonight's over-under for the Leafs-Bruins game is set at 6.5. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get in on the action. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, we have the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel over there. It's called Locked On Sports Today. And you want to get all the latest on everything from around the sports world over there. It's now also available on the Amazon Fire TV app, free TV channels app. Just search it up, find Locked On Sports Today, now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app. I mentioned the 32 Thoughts podcast earlier this morning, and they were talking about each team and how the Bruins appear to be more in the market for a hockey trade than perhaps entering the rental market or giving up futures to add. And a big part of that is because they don't really have much in the way of futures. Draft picks, especially no first, second, or third this year, and no second next year. So what could they be able to do? Well, a hockey trade, quote unquote, would signal moving a piece off the roster and adding another piece. You look at their pending unrestricted free agents, and, typically prior to the trade deadline, it's those kind of players that you look to as candidates to be moved. So you have birthday boy, happy birthday, Derek Forbort, unrestricted free agent coming up. You have Matt Grzelcyk on the blue line, as well as Kevin Shattenkirk. Now, Shattenkirk could be more easily moved because of his cap hit, which is like a third or almost a quarter of Forbort and Grzelcyk's respectively. And then up front, you have Jake DeBrusk, James Van Riemsdyk, and Danton Heinen as unrestricted free agents. Now, both Van Riemsdyk, Heinen, very good value contracts, could be easily moved. Of course, the whole idea would be to build for the future, add some pieces that you might be able to re-sign or who have some term left on their contracts. You're not just dumping these guys necessarily for draft picks, although it might not be the worst idea. You're in a playoff position. You could sell some of these older guys, call up some younger guys, and give them some valuable experience down the stretch. Now, when it comes to untouchables on this roster, I think there's really three that come to mind in terms of building blocks for the future that you are not going to move. The obvious one, David Pastrnak up front, your best player, one of the best players in the NHL. He's locked in. He's not going anywhere. On the back end, you have Charlie McAvoy, who's locked in for several more seasons. Norris Trophy candidate, all-world defenseman. He's not going anywhere. And then in net, you have Jeremy Swayman, a restricted free agent. He's going to be due a bigger payday this summer. He's your franchise goalie moving forward. Those are the only three guys on the main roster. You'll notice I left off Brad Marchand. He's a guy I would not think that they would trade. He's their captain, huge part of the team. He is slumping, only one goal in his past 11 games. They really need him to get things going. But in terms of like untouchability, if another playoff or Stanley Cup hopeful came and offered you this huge package of picks, prospects, young players for Brad Marchand, it's something that you would have to look at. Pastrnak, McAvoy, Ullmark, those are guys, Swayman, those are guys that are not going anywhere. I guess you could throw Mason Lohrei in the mix as well as a guy who's on the main roster. More of a prospect. He didn't have the best game on Saturday, but he's not going anywhere as well, and neither is Fabian Lysell. I think that's a guy who's really come on this season in the AHL. I'd like to see him up on the big club sooner than later. You could argue that perhaps Georgi Merkulov belongs on there, but really I think those are the five untouchables for the Boston Bruins. Pastrnak, McAvoy, Swayman, Lohrei, and Lysell. Your top two prospects and your three core players. Everything else should be on the table. Maybe not next year's first round pick because you've already lost or you've already given away this year's. But anything other than that should be on the table for the Boston Bruins to either flip to another team or certainly sell unrestricted free agents or use in a hockey trade. What do you think? Disagree? Agree? Let me know in the YouTube comments or on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. Are there any other untouchables other than the five that I just mentioned? You could argue, again, Brad Marchand, you could put in that category, not because, his future is bright with this team. He's 35 already, under contract for 2 more seasons. He could very well play 2-3 more after that, but he's not obviously in his prime. And again, if a package came along with a bunch of draft picks, some prospects, young players, that would be hard to turn or not even entertain at the very least. You could argue Pavel Zacha is untouchable, under contract for 3 more seasons. After this one, he's having a career year, injured, like I mentioned. But he and Charlie Coyle, if you had an opportunity to flip one of those guys to improve at the center position, especially Coyle, since he's 32, Zacha still only 26, it's something you would look at. And then maybe you could argue Trent Frederick as a guy who signed for next season at a very reasonable $2.3 million. If he continues to grow and impress and develop offensively, be a driver, then, he's a very valuable player at his current cap hit. Linus Ullmark, I don't think is untouchable. I think we all love the goalie tandem. We all love the goalie hugs. We all love the relationship that those two have. Oh my gosh, I'm completely forgetting one other untouchable. So you have the 3 core guys who are all world at their positions already. Then you had the 2 prospects that I mentioned in Lysell and Lohrei. And then, of course, Matthew Poitras. He's an untouchable, in my opinion. Cracked the team out of the OHL this year. He's only 19 years old. An incredibly bright future. He's going to turn 20 next week. He's a guy that will not be touched or should not be traded, in my opinion. So there's 6 guys. That's it, who should not be traded come the trade deadline. Let me know what you think. If you disagree, agree. Again, untouchables, McAvoy, Swayman, Pasternak, Lohrei, Lysell, Poitras. Your core presently, the brightest prospects. This is not a year that you give up futures in order to try to improve the roster. Nobody's kidding themselves into thinking this is a Stanley Cup team, Stanley Cup contender. This isn't last year where you go all in and then some. This is the year where you take what you've achieved so far, ride into the playoffs, give some young guys some valuable experience. Don't load up on, you've already got those veteran guys who are here to help them along in Van Riemsdyk, Shattenkirk, Heinen. You could either sell those guys or bring them along to help some of the young guys down the stretch. But in terms of giving up prospects, picks to try to go all in this season, I don't think it's the year to do that. And we'll get a preview of what could be coming up in the playoffs this week with 2 games against the Maple Leafs. We'll talk about the week ahead here as the podcast continues. If you're looking for tickets for your next big event, there's no better place to look than Gametime. Gametime is the fastest and easiest way to get tickets for your next sports, theater, comedy, or music event. They have amazing last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and a best price guarantee, taking all the guesswork out of buying tickets. I love the view from your seat. You know exactly what to expect when you get there. And the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Gametime, last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. All right, the Bruins are up here in Ontario tonight, taking on the Maple Leafs at Scotiabank Arena. And this could be a pretty telling week for the Boston Bruins. They play Toronto tonight. Then they fly home to take on Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and the Edmonton Oilers tomorrow night. They get 1 day off, and then back at it Thursday with another game against the Maple Leafs. And then Saturday, they host the Pittsburgh Penguins. a team that lost big time to Edmonton last night, really struggling to stay alive in the playoff race. So they'll be desperate to pick up a couple points against a team that's in a playoff spot in our Boston Bruins. Let's just focus on tonight's game, though, against Toronto. Again, the Leafs are 6 points back of the Bruins in the standings, but they have 2 games in hand. And with Florida in first, Boston tumbling a little bit, this could be a first round preview because it's 2 versus 3 in the Atlantic. Second seed gets home ice advantage. Third seed will be the road team. I mean, we saw last year, we've seen in 2019, home ice advantage doesn't always dictate who wins and not always, beneficial, but it's still important because you start at home, you can end at home as well. This is the third meeting between these two teams this season. Both have gone to extra time. The Bruins won 3-2 on November 2nd in a shootout. They won 4-3 on December 2nd in overtime. And again, they're set for 2 games this week, one tonight and the other on Thursday. The Leafs, over their past 10 games, pretty good. Pretty good. They're 9-1, in fact, over their past 10 games, coming off a shootout win over the Rangers, a regulation win over Arizona. Their last loss was a couple games ago against Vegas, but they previously beat Colorado and Vegas over their past 5. So they've been playing some pretty good hockey as of late. William Nylander leads the way with 9 points over their past 5 games. Tyler Bertuzzi leads the way with 5 goals over their past 5 games. They're, of course, led in scoring by Austin Matthews, who's on pace for just an unbelievable goal production season anyways. 53 goals in 59 games, 79 total points. He's not the team leader in points, however, as William Nylander having a more complete season with 33 goals and 50 assists to lead them with 83 points. Now, special teams wise, this team has the second ranked power play, 28.4% success rate. Penalty kill, not the best, 21st ranked. Boston's power play is 8th. Their penalty kill is currently at 9th. The Leafs are a pretty good face-off team, though. They rank 4th, 54% success rate. Bruins are at 20th. And if Pavel Zacha is out of the lineup, that could be a problem tonight for the Boston Bruins. Montgomery, I should add on, Zacha said he didn't know whether it was day-to-day or week-to-week following the game on Saturday. So we'll have to see, if he's not in there tonight, how long exactly he will be out of the lineup. What else do you need to know about tonight's game? Well, the Leafs have the top offense in the NHL, 3.65 goals per game. Boston's down to 10th at 3.31. Boston's much better defensively, though. They're allowing only 2.76 goals per game. Toronto's allowing 3.15 goals per game, which is 19th. So it'll be Boston's, top 6 defense against Toronto's number 1 offense tonight. Should be Swayman in net for Boston after Ullmark, did not play great against the Islanders. Swayman's got a .919 save percentage. The Leafs are currently carrying 3 goalies, and we'll see who's in net tonight. Ilya Samsonov with a 883 save percentage for the season. Joseph Woll back up. He's got a 918. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in net for this big game tonight against the Bruins. That's it for today's episode, my friends. I'm very excited to watch tonight's game. We'll be back, of course, tomorrow to recap what happens, bring you all the latest in terms of trade reports and rumors, and also preview a game against the Edmonton Oilers back in Boston tomorrow night. I hope you all had a great weekend. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, taking care of each other. We'll talk to you again here tomorrow on a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.